reason things are so tough and everyone, is fighting with each other is because life's getting harder. Life's getting harder because the Fed prints tons of money and we all suffer from inflation. And it's a subtle con. It involves the monetary system, and it's not the kind of thing that the average person thinks about. The average person just gets up, goes to work, does their job, wants to make some money, take their family, raise them. They don't want to go kill people in foreign lands. They just, they're normal. But what they don't realize is it's as if they've been carrying around a big leech for their whole life, which is this inflation leech that just takes away the value of what they earn and it makes it harder for them to save. And unless you're a quintillionaire and you know how to borrow money at 0%, you pay the credit card company 25%, so you're not really able to take advantage of the inflation. We're in a fourth turning. The monetary system is breaking. Most people have no clue that this is going on, and count yourself lucky that you're aware of it and know how to protect yourself, because if you weren't aware of it and didn't know how to protect yourself, you probably wouldn't be in this room. Everybody in this room is going to be rich, fabulously rich, in 10 or 20 years, in my view. Well, I think most everybody in this room has Bitcoin. Don't you think, John? This is the way to fix the system. There are going to be politicians who are going to be sound money politicians in the future. There's going to be more pain meted out as a result of the brokenness of the system. And sadly, some people are going to respond to that pain in the wrong way. They're going to do the AOC and Bernie thing and say, well, we got to tax the rich, or they're going to come at it from a lot of different bad angles that don't really solve the underlying problem. I mean, I was really shocked last year when we had a presidential debate, only one, and both presidential candidates, nobody mentioned the debt, the deficit, or the fiscal situation that the country's in, and yet it's probably the most critical thing affecting the well-being of every single American. And it's not even discussed. It's like the thing that we cannot talk about. It's nice to see everybody, a lot of familiar faces. I don't know, what can I say? The book is selling well, and we're just trying to orange pill the entire world. That's why I wrote the book. Yeah, and if you like it, give it to your friends, pass it along. It was written. It's different than the other Bitcoin books out there, I think, because it was written aimed more at making it easier to understand for a normie. And most of you probably read it or familiar with it. Really, just two parts. Part one is the bad news, why we've been screwed, how we've been screwed, and lays out the history of that in detail. And I think a lot of people don't always know that history; they don't understand it. And then obviously the second part is the solution. So the first part's depressing and the second part's optimistic. The first part got written because I was watching people talk on TV last year about the election, and it just, I was stunned with the stupidity and the pointlessness of all the debate that was going on, and nobody was really focusing on the core issue, which is the money's broken. And the reason things are so tough and everyone, is fighting with each other is because life's getting harder. Life's getting harder because the Fed prints tons of money and we all suffer from inflation. And so I just thought somebody's got to write a book to explain this to everyday people, hopefully convince them that, this is what happened. It's subtle. I mean, the con that the Keynesians and the central bankers and the government and the Federal Reserve, the con that they pulled on all of us it's a subtle con. It involves the monetary system, and it's not the kind of thing that the average person thinks about. The average person just gets up, goes to work, does their job, wants to make some money, take their family, raise them. They don't want to go kill people in foreign lands. They just, they're normal. They're not psychopaths. And, but what they don't realize is it's as if they've been carrying around a big leech for their whole life, which is this inflation leech that just takes away the value of what they earn and it makes it harder for them to save. And unless you're a quintillionaire and you know how to borrow money at 0%, you pay the credit card company 25%, so you're not really able to take advantage of the inflation. I mean, the best inflationary bet most people could make, and a lot of people did, was to buy a house, because at least it's a real asset the government can't print. And for a while, you could buy them with a 3% mortgage, and some of us did, and that was a good thing to do, obviously. But beyond that, it's pretty hard for the average person to get money at 3% or anything close to it. So I try to explain that, and I try to give enough examples to get people mad, because I'm mad, as most of you know. And, and because I think getting mad and realizing what the problem is what's likely to lead to the solution, which is returning to a system of sound money like Bitcoin provides. And so, and this fourth turning is going to be tumultuous. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. I mean, we just saw another one today and we discussed it, but, Trump comes out with these tariffs, which probably are long overdue. And I mean, it's kind of a brilliant move. He points out that, we're just tariffing people at half of what they tariff us at. So that really makes him look kind of magnanimous. And, unsurprisingly, the stock market doesn't like it very much. The futures are down 400 basis points right now as I speak. So, and gold's up $30. So, we're in a fourth turning. The monetary system is breaking. Most people have no clue that this is going on, and count yourself lucky that you're aware of it and know how to protect yourself. Because if you weren't aware of it and didn't know how to protect yourself, you probably wouldn't be in this room. And everybody in this room is going to be rich, fabulously rich, in 10 or 20 years, in my view. Well, I think most everybody in this room has Bitcoin, don't you think, John?
Oh.
Well, if they don't, we're going to convert them. By the time we're done, they'll have Bitcoin. So that's really the story. The book's sold pretty well, from what metrics are. About 15,000 have sold so far in a month and a half. Yeah, I mean, I'm told that's reasonably good. The bestseller lists are kind of 20 to 50,000. We'll get there, but that's really not what I'm aiming for. I mean, we got 330 million Americans, and I mean, Morgan Housel writes a book on the psychology of money, which is a fine book, but nothing special. He sold 7 million copies of that thing. I mean, we got to sell millions of these things. We got to get this out so that everybody knows and starts buying this stuff. I mean, it's got to get passed from hand to hand and friend to friend. And I say that not just because I make a couple bucks on every book, and I do, but I say it because, this is the way to fix the system. There are going to be politicians who are going to be sound money politicians in the future. There's going to be more pain meted out as a result of the brokenness of the system. And sadly, some people are going to respond to that pain in the wrong way. They're going to do the AOC and Bernie thing and say, well, we got to tax the rich, or they're going to come at it from a lot of different bad angles that don't really solve the underlying problem. I mean, I was really shocked last year when we had a presidential debate, only one, and both presidential candidates, nobody mentioned the debt, the deficit, or the fiscal situation that the country's in. And yet it's probably the most critical thing affecting the well-being of every single American. And it's not even discussed. It's like the thing that we cannot talk about. It's like the family secret that, I mean, dad's a pedophile or something and nobody ever talks about it, right? And so, I'm talking about it, and the book talks about it, and we got to all talk about it because it's going to become real. And when it becomes real, people are going to be looking for solutions. They're going to be, bombarded with different approaches and people saying, well, I've got the great solution. But if they actually study history, I think they're going to come to the conclusion that Bitcoin is the solution and a return to sound money is the solution. So that's the purpose of the book, and that's why I wrote it. And it'll be successful in my mind. I mean, Bitcoiners love it, and I appreciate that. I appreciate all the compliments and the feedback I've gotten, but I knew Bitcoiners would like it because Bitcoiners get it. The target market is no coiners and normies who are just living their life and but don't and feel like something's wrong, but they don't know what it is. And so that's what the book's aimed at. And if I can, I've sent it to Tucker, I've sent it to Joe Rogan, I've sent it to JD Vance, I've sent it to every media outlet I can think of. None of them, I don't think any of them read it or picked up on it, but I've got to get to some bigger channels. We've got to get this more broadly distributed. And I'm going to send it to Oprah. I mean, and maybe I get on our book club. I mean, I need a Tucker to come out and say, hey, this book really describes what's wrong and how to fix it. He's got millions and millions and millions of listeners, and then it goes viral, and then we really win. So that's the goal. Anybody who has any ideas on media contacts or ideas of how to spread this message, that's what I'm all about. My personal mission is to orange pill the entire damn world. Because I think that's what will fix our society. That's what will fix the problems. That's what's going to give my 20-year-old kids a better world to live in. So that's yeah, thanks. That's kind of the opening prelude. Where do you want to go from there, John? I mean, we do questions, or there's a lot of stuff going on. We talk about what's going on. I mean,
So let's start with questions. Who's got questions? I know.
So the book was great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Early in the book, you talk about all the bank bailouts, all the issues with banks, and how they're always, too big to fail.
Yeah.
But later in the book, you talk about the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And one of the problems with the Great Depression and why it lasted so long is they didn't help the banks.
Right.
It seems like a contradiction.
It is a little bit. I mean, Bernanke says what they didn't do correct in the Great Depression is they didn't print enough money. And in my view, if you really study what happened in the Great Depression, why it became great was that all the small banks failed because of the real bills doctrine. So they were kind of caught between old money, old hard money, gold standard stuff with real bills, etc., and printing money, which the Fed did plenty of, by the way, in the Great Depression. And ideally, the Great Depression is a one-off event that occurred as a result of an enormous credit bubble that got built as a result of trying to manage the economy post World War I. And the way to avoid depressions is to avoid bubbles, because credit events, things breaking, that's what happens when a bubble forms. And so, if you don't have a bubble, you don't have a depression. I personally am not. I wouldn't have been in favor of bailing out the banks, but if you actually study the history of it, and Bernanke never talks about it, there were 30 or 40,000 banks that failed, and back then there was no FDIC, and so people literally got wiped out, as a result of that. And what I propose is you recall at the end of the book is that we get rid of the FDIC, we get rid of the Fed, and banks have to compete like any other business. And so what will happen is some good banks will emerge that will say, we're a full reserve bank, or we're a 60% reserve bank, and we don't use leverage, and you can feel safe putting your money here, and they'll thrive and they won't have a problem. And the riskier players will run into trouble, and creative destruction will kill them, and that's how it should be. So it is a little bit of a contradiction, but it's just a historical fact that it wasn't the lack of money printing that made the Depression so bad. It was letting all those banks fail, and he never mentions that. He wanted to justify his policy, which is run the printer, the helicopter Ben, the way he was, and so he doesn't mention what I think was the real cause of all the pain, which was the bank failures. Yeah.
The 4-year cycle.
Yeah.
Seemed to have less of an effect this time.
Yeah, that's no. I don't think it's dead. The thing is always evolving, right? Every cycle is different, but I think the 4-year cycle does still apply, and I think we're in the upswing part of the 4-year cycle. We've obviously backtraced a bit from the most recent high, but I don't think that high is likely to be the end. And I do think that we will ultimately, I'm very confident we'll be at 140 by year end, and I think there's a good chance we could be anywhere between that and 500, by the end of 26. And the reason for that is I think the next big print will come. I think the mathematics of the situation are driving them into a position where they will have no choice but to pivot, to do yield curve control, to do quantitative easing, to take interest rates down substantially, just to try and keep the economy together. And you watch. I mean, as we've seen, they can change their narrative on a dime. They weren't even thinking about raising rates, and then in February 2022, bang, he just starts raising rates. He goes crazy. And so, the next thing we'll hear out of the Federal Reserve after the market falls 30% in the next 2 months, which I think it will, the next thing we'll hear out of the Federal Reserve, and employment starts to turn down and people start getting laid off and the economy is slow, the Fed's going to say, yeah, you know what, we've conquered inflation, good enough for government work. Yeah, it's 3%, but it's coming down, which is a lie. But they'll say that, and we've now got to focus on our employment mandate, and we're going to do emergency rate cuts. And if the bond market doesn't behave, then they're going to say we're going to do yield curve control, or they have other tools. I mean, they're very good at creating new acronyms, new names, new technologies, new ways of printing money and trying to pretend it's not printing money. Like, the BTF, FP thing, I don't know what it really stands for. I call it buy the fucking paper. Okay. That was their mechanism for bailing out Silicon Valley Bank, which they did, which, by the way, that shouldn't have happened. I mean, in the book says this. I mean, Dodd-Frank was established because they bailed out all the banks in 08. And, I remember the time very well. I mean, this country was pissed off. I mean, this was not capitalism. I mean, people lost their houses, their jobs. They got really hammered. The bankers paid themselves record bonuses, and they got to just go on like nothing had ever happened. And so the country was pissed. And that's what led to Dodd-Frank. But they really kind of, one, they watered it down. It was written by financial types, so they watered it down a lot. And then two, when it came time to enforce Dodd-Frank, which would have said, hey, Silicon Valley Bank, guess what? You fucked up. Your depositor is going to take a 20% hit. Bill Ackman and everyone else who had deposits there came out and said, hey, the whole banking system will go south if we do that. We can't do it. And so they ignored Dodd-Frank and relied on the, extraordinary circumstances, systematic, collapse loophole of the Federal Reserve Act, and they bailed it out. right? And this is what they will always do, and they have to do that in their system. I mean, in a system where money is debt, it's like a shark. It has to swim. You have to breathe. You have to keep creating money to service the debt, because every piece of debt becomes a future liability to be paid back and to have interest paid on it. So, and that's all broken and wrong, and has gotten more. And the book lays it out. Has gotten more broken and wrong progressively. It started. It started in the War of 1812. I mean, they suspended specie redemption. Then it got worse in the Civil War when they created greenbacks. Then it got worse still in 1913 when they created the Fed. Then it got worse in the 30s when they grabbed all the gold and went off didn't let Americans hold gold, citizens. And it got really bad after 71. I mean, the chart in the beginning of the book shows how it just went hockey stick. And so, this problem is a continual problem, and it's spaced out. I mean, they can let that debt grow for a while, but eventually it comes, you come a cropper. And the first big example of that was the GFC, where Bernanke had to print a ton of money, take interest rates down to zero, and so forth. The second big example, and it was bigger, was COVID. And I call the book The Big Print, but there actually have already been two big prints. There was one in 2008, and there was one in 2020. And what we know, I know with a high degree of certainty, I believe there will be another one. It'll be even bigger, right? And that's just the way the system's constructed. It's not as much my opinion as it's almost math,
So we have President Trump with Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent and Elon Musk out there, the trifecta, doing the podcast circuits, trying to tell us that they're going to solve this problem by cutting expenses and raising revenue. Do you buy it?
I don't, sadly. I mean, I think some of what they're doing is the right direction and necessary. I mean, Doge finding all that USAID fraud and a lot of other stuff, that's all good. I mean, one of the things that I talk about in the book, and it was always amazing to me, was, the spending level in this country was in the kind of 4.5 trillion range pre-COVID. COVID took it up to 6.75 trillion, so we kind of grew it by a couple trillion. Yeah, maybe 7.3, but and it was 6.75 last year, but it should have come back down. And this is the thing. In theory, okay, so that's one of the things about ZIRP. Like in 2008, for example, okay, it's an emergency. You got to print money. You got to take rates to zero. I get it. Okay, I don't agree with it, but I get it. I get why they did it. But they kept interest rates at zero from 2008 to 2015. It was 7 years of free money. That's an enormous distortion. When money is free, it's not capitalism. It's a completely distorted system. But back to Trump and Doge, I don't think Doge is going to work. I think it's going to make a difference at the margin, but I believe that we're too far gone. That nothing stops this train. We're pretty well down the road. Let's say, 80% of the spending is in defense, Medicare, interest, and Social Security. Without taking a big hatchet to that, and watch your voter base go berserk if anybody tries to do that. You can't, the remaining 1.4 trillion, you'd have to take it to zero, and you still wouldn't balance the budget. We had a deficit of 1.8 last year, and it appears to be like we're running it closer to 2.2 or 2.3 right now. So let's say Doge eliminates 300 or 400 billion. So we go from 2.3 down to 1.9. It's the same as before. So, it's a very intractable problem, and I kind of applaud what Trump is doing. What's yet to be determined. It's probably going to create a lot of disruption in the markets, as we're seeing. It could create a stock market crash. It could create a bond market crash. I think what he's going to do is he's effectively going to force the Fed's hand where they're going to have to monetize it. And what will be interesting to see, no doubt what he's going to try and do is blame it on Biden. He's doing it in the first part of his administration. So he can say, hey, look, I was given this shitty hand of cards. I played it as best I could. I did things that were America first oriented. The fact that everything collapsed, that's not my problem. That's the guys who set this thing up, this problem. Whether he can pull that off or not, I don't know. You got angry voters out there, and tariffs are inflationary. And, if the Fed goes back to printing, there's going to be more inflation. And so, there's going to be a vote on what they're doing in 2 years, and then there'll be another big vote in 4 years. And it's entirely possible that, in the 4 years, some dumb Americans are going to think, well, he's to blame, and they're going to vote blue, and then we're going to have, AOC and Bernie and taxes and, all the Stephanie Kelton will be the Treasury Secretary, and, Andrew Yang will be vice president. We'll have universal basic income, and, MMT will be accepted, and it'll be, and by the way, they've already established, I talked about this in another pod today, they've already established an interesting precedent. The STEMI checks were almost like a test case, right? test run. Okay, yeah, we got to do all these policies and they're really tough and this, that, and that, but be quiet. It's going to be okay. We're going to send you some money. We're going to send you some money, and so that'll be used again, is my guess. But where does that money come from, right? Yeah, go ahead.
How about reducing, the votes and all that, the expense will have international trade deficit on lower.
It will. It will, and the tariffs will bring in income, and that will be a positive. I mean, I'm not disputing that what Trump is doing is right. I mean, arguably it is right to get, to kill the dollar and to get away from the dollar-centric system. What I am saying, though, is that I think Bessent particularly is naive. Even though he's a hedge fund manager and he should know how markets work, I think he's underestimating how disruptive this is going to be. I mean, I don't know. I'd be curious to know Craig's view, because Craig's a professional hedge fund manager and probably knows Bessent and has a view on this. My sense is, don't you think, I mean, his view that we can thread the needle and kind of get through this and the good stuff will kick in before the bad stuff gets too bad, I don't see it. I mean, this is a bubble, and typically when bubbles burst, it's not pretty. I don't know. What do you think, Craig?
I think it's going to happen a lot faster than people realize. It's going to be a lot worse. We talked about this in the Bitcoin days in January.
Right.
Because that markets were euphoric about Trump coming in and policies and things about regulation and tax cuts. And the problem was the markets were euphoric the day he got in, and he had to deal with that shit that he was left with first.
Right.
Through his pain. And fortunately, we got a bubble for decades.
Right.
We could pierce it in weeks.
I think that's right.
The tariff stuff that we just got was another one of those catalysts where it shocks the economy, it shocks the global system. And I agree. I think that's it's naive to believe he's going to gracefully be able to manage.
Yeah, have some kind of graceful deleveraging. I just don't see it. Which by the way is go ahead. Oh, we can't hear? Yeah, he kind of agreed with what I said, which is that this tariff stuff is very disruptive, and he thinks that Bessent is being naive about the implications that it will have on the economy, that the economy will get hit harder. He's trying to do it gracefully, but it's unlikely for that to occur. Yeah, go ahead.
You should have done the tax cuts first, and then the other one behind one of the tariffs, so we don't have to ask that.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. I think Luke Roman, I think, has it actually right. I mean, the biggest thing that needs to take place, and I don't think there's any political will to do it right now, is we really need to do we really need to do a reset. I mean, the problem boiled down to its simplest terms, debt is too high relative to GDP. Okay, yeah.
You really think of the $36 trillion debt? Who believes that?
Nobody believes that. But the point is, well, they want us to, but the point is that if we were to do some kind of a reset wherein we either negotiated with our debtors to give them less, or we said we're going to buy Bitcoin and gold, and put them on the balance sheet, and in the process, so doing, decrease the value of the dollar, and then go to a sound money standard on a go-forward basis, that would be an enormous shock to the system. It would be one time very painful, but it actually would address the underlying issue.
No country has lasted over 100 years. And you got to realize that.
I think that's possibly right. I think the pound has actually been around the longest of any fiat currency, and Britain is not dissolved, and it's been around. They've been on. Well, yeah, but your statement's incorrect. Britain went off the gold standard in 1913, and it's 100 years later, it's still around, and they're on fiat. Your statement's incorrect. It is. It's just a fact. So go ahead.
So with the chaos that might or will probably ensue, what's the best way, other than self-custody of our Bitcoin, to protect ourselves?
Well, I think self-custody of Bitcoin is a great way to protect yourself. I think owning gold is a great way to protect yourself. I think having a second passport probably isn't crazy. Yeah, to me, it's pretty clear that people who save in dollar terms, are going to be severely damaged in the next 10 to 20 years, severely. There's going to be a wealth transfer that I think is going to blow people's minds. And, there's going to be before the Great Reset and after the Great Reset. And the people who are on the right side of this are going to, benefit enormously. and the people who are on the wrong side of it are going to suffer a great deal of pain. Is my sense. Yeah, go ahead. I talk about it in the book. I mean, a lot of people have been hanging out in real estate. There's a lot of monetary premium in real estate. I mean, particularly these $10, $20 million homes. I just don't get it. Right? It's just a bunch of sticks and a place to live. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, I think the biggest downside I see in real estate is that you can't move it, and the state has a first claim on it in terms of property taxes. And so, the state, if this is the fourth turning that I think it is, all organizations in the government are going to run deficits. And how are they going to try and address that? They're going to raise taxes. And so one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin and gold is that, they're both outside of the system, and they can raise taxes, but we don't have to necessarily tell them what we have or sell and trigger the tax event. So I think they're a much better choice. But I mean, the positive on real estate is there's only so much of it. There's only so much land, and you can't print sticks and bricks and houses and all that. It's a physical asset, so it's a much better choice than bonds, and I would even argue it's probably a better choice than stocks right now. I mean, stocks in hyperinflation or very high inflationary environments tend to not do particularly well. In super hyperinflationary environments, they go up in nominal terms, but if you look at it in real terms, they really don't get ahead very much. That's just the price of the stock going up. But at least a stock, it represents a claim on the earnings power of a business. So, yeah, go ahead.
Can you speak about the bonds?
I like that idea a lot. Are you talking about the thing that Andrew Honan is talking about? Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I mean, the United States should try to defease its debt by buying Bitcoin or by issuing bonds with a Bitcoin or a gold component. Judy Shelton proposed the same thing with gold. And there's, by the way, there's the whole debate of, do we even want the country to buy Bitcoin, and to if you're real anti-statist, you're kind of like, why do I even care if the government buys Bitcoin? In fact, I want the government to fail, so I don't even want them to buy it. But the way I look at it is, I prefer my government to a Chinese government or a Russian government, as flawed as the United States is. So I want our government to adopt Bitcoin as its monetary standard, because I think I'd rather have my government running the world or being important in the world than these other two countries. So, the way out of this thing, yes, they need to, this goes back to the reset thing. What they need to do is they need to get the dollar-based debt to be a small number compared to both their assets and their GDP. And the way you do that is you write up the value of your assets, which gold is one, and if you own Bitcoin, that's another. And then you inflate your GDP, which is very painful. I mean, because it's going to take a lot of inflation. I mean, some people said, well, we got out of this once before. If you recall, after World War II, we had about 120, 130% debt to GDP because the war was very expensive. And they got out of it. And the way they did it is they did yield curve control, and they had passive bond investors who got killed, but they were there and they bought the bonds. And we also had a great demographic setup and a big productivity boom with the GIs coming back and building houses and buying cars and having babies and all that. So we kind of earned our way out of that imbalance. And the positive case here for where we are today is that AI and some of the other productivity improvements that we're seeing, shale oil, et cetera, could help us earn our way out of this thing. And that's possible. I mean, a combination. I mean, I think what Besant and Trump and others are hoping is, cut back on the expenses, drill, baby, drill, push AI, push innovation, push the things that America is good at, technology and development, that all of those things will lead to us kind of working our way out of this mess. And I'd say that's a possibility. I think it's completely doing it without pain. I think it's a low probability, but I don't think it's impossible. I just think that the thing it's gone so far and it's gotten so large that it seems unlikely to me. And the nature, when I overlay that with the nature of the bubble that's been created, I mean, in my view, we are really in an everything bubble. And the reason we're in an everything bubble is that people could borrow at 0% or low rates and buy assets. And so those assets got overpriced. The debt and the equity both got very overpriced. And ZERP from 08 to 15 and from 19 to 22, that created a lot of distortions. And so a lot of the prices out there today, they're not real. These houses in Port Royal, they're not worth $20 or $30 million. They're just not. But that's where they're priced at today. Yeah.
Can you go over again, and you detailed it in your book, but more specifically maybe on why those closest to the money spigot benefit so much and those furthest away
Sure.
hurt so much, and especially like I know the bankers and politicians are close,
Yeah.
and they do really well. Are there any other groups that really do well? Being
Well, real estate people. I mean, you've all seen the meme where, me thinking I'm good at real estate, dunking the basketball, and of course, inflation is holding them up there, right? I mean, I think that's a great meme. I mean, so real estate investors have done pretty well. The reason to the first part of your question, the reason why cantillionaires and the PE crowd, the hedge fund crowd, the smart financial crowd does so well in this system is that they know how to game it. They understand that these fixed assets are going. I mean, and arguably Michael Saylor falls into this camp. They understand what must debase, which is the currency, and so they borrow in the thing that's going to debase because they know they can pay it back in cheaper terms, right? And then they take that proceeds of the borrowing, it's a carry trade, and they put it into something that must grow in value because it's limited in supply and it has positive earnings characteristics. And that's, in Michael Saylor's case, that's Bitcoin, but in other people have done it with gold, and people have done it with real estate and just operating businesses. I mean, the whole PE crowd, those guys got silly rich, because they were able to borrow at very, very cheap rates and put the proceeds into something that earned, 10, 20, 30%. And, if your cost of capital is extremely low and your returns are 20 or 30%, and then you lever it up, you get really rich quick, right? And that's wonderful, but you and I can't borrow at those rates. I mean, we go to the credit card company, they want to charge us 25%. And we get a 3% mortgage, or we used to be able to get a 3% mortgage against our house, but that was about it, right? And so the Wall Street people, the financial people, the people who understood the system, the rich people, could figure out how to game it. And that process of gaming it led to all prices going up. And the working person, they don't see their wages increase. They're the last for the new money gets put into the system, and it hits their wage last. So the people who borrow that money, they get to use that new money to buy assets cheaply that they know will go up, right? And then by the time those prices flow through the whole economy, the guy at the end, he's got higher grocery expenses and his wages haven't gone up. You see what I'm saying? That's how it happens. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So I could be completely wrong here, but if the U.S. were to default, state fails, and all that, could our debtors or the people we're in debt to, like China and possibly Russia, I'm not entirely sure, could they buy out our property and basically buy up all of
They could, although I would guess that an America First administration would prevent people from doing that. I mean, I think the greatest threat that we face, and it's become more apparent to me. I'm sure, Craig, you see this too, and and it scares me when I read Luke Groman, is that frankly, we've hollowed out our industrial base to such an extent that we can't even build the weapons and the materials that we need to conduct a war. And so if we were to get into a war with China, we would need shit that China produces. Well, that's kind of a problem. Do you know what I mean? Now, hopefully, China doesn't really want to take over America. I don't think they do, but it's not a position you want to be in. And I think the Defense Department realized this long ago. There were people writing about this in the early 2012, 2011, 2015 period. That the fact that we are hollowing out our industrial base leaves us strategically vulnerable to being able to fight a war. I mean, we haven't been able to supply the shells that Ukraine needs. I mean, it's really kind of troublesome, that what we've done. And I think Trump realizes that, and that's why he's trying to reshore all these industries. But right, exactly. And so there are problems and risks associated with everything we're doing. But I mean, better to try and pull it back from the edge later than never. And so I do support, generally speaking, what he's doing. But I think I'm not even sure he and Bessent understand just how disruptive this is going to be. And I think that and the one who's really going to be shocked, in my view, because I just don't think he understands economics at all, is Powell. I mean, Powell. If I were Powell, I'd be praying that March arrives soon, so I get the fuck out of there, because when the next one comes, it's going to be big, and it's going to make COVID look like a walk in the park. It's going to make 2008 look like a walk in the park. And we're seeing signs, by the way. I mean, some of you don't know this. we're seeing signs of the next one's coming. I mean, perfect example. Who laid it out? Who had the good tweet about the Brookings Institute paper and how, it was on Zero Hedge. Remember, Craig? So the Brookings Institute floated a policy paper that basically said we should put in place a policy that agrees to provide quiet or, pre-set up swap lines to all of the hedge funds that are involved in the basis trade. The basis trade is where a hedge fund buys, it was James Lavish who actually had a great tweet on it. Go look at Lavish's thread. He had a free article on it in the last week, and it was really great. And basis trade is what allows hedge funds to buy treasuries and capture a very tiny spread between the future treasury price and the current treasury price. And the spread's so tiny that to make it really work for them, they lever the shit out of it. So they buy a lot of treasuries, which the government loves because it needs somebody to sell the treasuries to. And it works fine if markets are calm. But when markets become uncalm and get into crisis-like conditions, the spreads blow out, and these guys are deeply, deeply underwater. I mean, in March of 2020, Ken Griffin and Citadel were completely and totally bankrupt, and they should have gone bankrupt. But Ben Bernanke serves on Citadel's board of advisors, okay, and it's been rumored that he's paid $20 million a year, and that he uses that to buy gold in Switzerland. And this is from somebody who knows him personally. Okay, I've heard it secondhand, but somebody who knows. And it was whatever Citadel was paying him to be their advisor. I'm sure he made the phone call to the Fed that said, either you give these guys a swap line or they're going down. And if they go down, they're 25% of all trading volume. All of Wall Street's going down. So, and this is how they do it, folks. They've set the game up so the bankers have a gun to our head that said, give me what I want. I'm going to blow your economy up. I'm going to shoot a bullet into the economy. Pick one. And so we give it to the bankers. I mean, that's just, it's almost like blackmail. Exactly. That's exactly right. And so that's the trick that they've all pulled on us, and they've wrapped it all in Keynesian nonsense, and they pay all. I mean, the whole system is set up to benefit the insiders in the system, and there's nobody looking out for you and me, or just the wage earner who just sees the cost of their living going up relentlessly because of all this money printing. So, and that's why but here's the good news. The good news is this technology called Bitcoin and all the technology around it, the internet and Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan and everybody else. We're dismantling this old sclerotic, corrupt system because people are learning. And so things like this book are going to educate more people, and more people are going to say, hey, this is fucked up. I'm getting out. I'm buying Bitcoin. And then we're going to have another couple of elections, and we're going to have high inflation, all kinds of monetary chaos is going on. And some politicians are going to step up and say, I'm in favor of sound money. We got to return to sound money. You got to read this guy's book. It explains why. And, he's going to get a lot of votes because everyone's going to say, hey, inflation's eating me alive. I like that. I want sound money. Because when we return to sound money, this is, they make it sound as though returning to sound money would be a horrible thing. I mean, when Judy Shelton, it's in the book, when Judy Shelton, who's a sound money advocate, got nominated for the Federal Reserve Board, I mean, it was like, they were they were besides themselves with terror that somebody who's actually in favor of sound money could get in there, and so they had 73 Nobel laureates and economists say that her views were dangerous and misguided, when in fact her views are what would protect the average American. And so, just in the same way that they say that we have to have a CIA, we have to have a military industrial complex, we have to have a powerful, military and government, because God knows there are a lot of boogeymen out there, including Iran, which is going to develop a nuclear weapon, right? They say all of that. And then if you talk against that, they call you a conspiracy theorist, because that's their standard term for just trying to, our views aren't even worth considering, because, we're so, they've created their own narrative to defend their own system. And the good news is, though, that, books and people and internet and podcasts, we're tearing that narrative apart. I mean, my father refused to believe that the CIA murdered Kennedy. And yet I'm 100% sure the CIA murdered Kennedy. I have no doubt. I mean, I've read so much about it. I have zero doubt in my mind. And the good news is, the country used to be a lot like my father. I mean, he was in the military. He said, this is a great country. There's no way they could have done that. I'm like, no, Dad, there's some really bad people out there. And they did it, right? And now I think I mean, I talk to my kids, I talk to 20-year-olds, I say, hey, do you guys think the CIA murdered? Oh, absolutely. Everybody fucking knows that, right? I mean, so, it's kind of like, we're all waking up and, we've got to recreate America. I mean, America was a great idea on paper and did a lot of great things. And I say in the book, we reached peak America when we won World War II. And then since then, we got sloppy. We got sloppy and some bad people got into positions of power and we did some stupid shit. And then some stupid shit led to more stupid shit. I mean, the killing Kennedy, led to a ramp up of the Vietnam War, which led to a ramp up of deficits, which led to going off the gold standard. And it was kind of like one stupid move followed the next. And what I think is that we are now at the long end of a lot of stupid moves. And, this can is pretty heavy and kicking it is getting really hard. And more importantly, probably, people like all of us in this room, all around the country, are starting to realize it. I mean, that's why Trump won. They were like, holy shit, this is just ridiculous. DEI, all this other crap. They're like, what the fuck? I mean, this is not America. And so there was there's a revolt. What I fear though is that, people are going to have, we've got to take, it's a long-term plan. I mean, we've had, probably say the deterioration started with the murder of Kennedy in '63. That's 40, what is that? No, it's more. It's like 60 years of deterioration. We can't fix 60 years of deterioration in one presidential term, right? I mean, it's going to take more than that. But we can put it in the right direction, and then if we build on it, we can go back to sound money. I mean, the other thing I really want to emphasize is that, despite all this gloom and doom, I've studied a lot of hyperinflations. I've studied a lot of countries that have fallen apart. And I was actually on a podcast yesterday with a really fun guy who grew up in Argentina. And Argentina had hyperinflation in the late 18 from 90 to 91 was when it got intense, but 1988, 89, it started. He was a teenager. And he said, it was horrible. My mom would, work her butt off and she'd get paid. She'd go right to the grocery store and buy food because she knew a week later everything was going to cost more. And, the money was failing. And then, of course, it totally failed. It became worthless. And what they did was they reset, and they reset to the dollar, which obviously the dollar's not perfect, but at the time it was a whole lot more stable than what they had. And he said, what was amazing to me, Larry, is it got better like really quickly. It was just like everything reorganized, and people worked and they got paid and they could, sound money works. It actually really works. So as bad as all this shit I'm describing is, try and keep your eye on the prize, which is getting to the other side, which is at that point in time, we have sound money. And, a lot of these problems, they just disappear. And, the average human being, in my view, wants to get up and work and be honest and not kill people and take care of their kids and, save their money and grow into retirement and have some time to enjoy themselves. I mean, I think, unless you're sick, that's what most people want. And yet that's not what the system is offering. The system is broken. And that's why I think so many people are disenfranchised and angry, So, yeah, go ahead.
Can you talk about on the other side, like in the good news part?
Yeah.
What's just like a fully reserved Bitcoin bank? What does that look like for the average family that might go and want to purchase a home? Is it more peer-to-peer lending? Like, what are your?
I think there'll still be debt and there'll still be lending, but there won't be nearly as much debt. I mean, I think if you people will be able to save knowing that their savings are growing in value. Homes will be cheaper because the monetary premium will have come out of homes, right? And generally speaking, in Bitcoin terms, there's a great chart in the book. It shows how the price of a home in Bitcoin terms really has decreased, and I think that will continue to increase. I foresee a world that looks a lot different than our world today. Our world today has a lot of debt. And when you want to do something, you take on debt to do it. Companies take on debt, people take on debt, everyone takes on debt. They're borrowing future consumption to consume today. I think our world in the future is going to look a lot different. You're not going to want to take on debt. And the reason is it's going to be expensive to pay it back because the value of the currency is going up in relative terms. And so companies won't go borrow money. They'll do equity offerings and share in the profits of the business through dividends. So it'll be, and if you think about it, if you study American business and the way it got built once the stock market became a thing, in the 1800s and early 1900s, there was not a lot of debt. I mean, companies raised capital by issuing shares. And then the shareholders held those shares, hoping they would go up in value and expecting a dividend to be paid for their investment. And there'll be a lot more of that, in my view. And that's a really good thing. It won't be a consume now. And really, that's, the book talks about this. All human progress, in my opinion, is built on savings and productively deploying those savings to increase efficiency. I mean, and this is simple shit. It goes back, this is why you do not eat your seed corn, or you do not eat all your chickens, right? Because you want to grow your chicken flock so that you have more chickens, they lay more eggs, they breed more chickens. You save some of your seed corn, so you plant a bigger harvest next year, and every year it gets bigger and bigger. Savings leads to productive investment, which then leads to more efficiency, which then leads to getting more for less. And Keynesians have turned this on its head. They've determined that growth is all that matters. It doesn't matter how you get there, borrow, whatever. In fact, make borrowing as cheap as possible so that we throw money at everything. No, there's a limited amount of quality money in the world. You got to be very selective at where you put your money. You don't want to invest it in stupid shit. You don't want to invest it in meme coins. You want to invest it in things that actually make the world better. And if you do that, if capital is allocated properly, and capital gets allocated properly when the interest rate is correct, then the world will be better. We would all be living a much higher standard of living if John Maynard Keynes had never lived. I mean, we would be much better off today. And we have all this technological progress, and these guys have fucked it up. So yeah, go ahead and way in the back.
Money, real estate. What is your prediction of what's going to happen to Los Angeles and how much it will cost to rebuild that?
Yeah, I haven't looked at that very much. I'm sure it's going to cost a ton, and it's a very sad situation, a sad story. I know people who lost their house in that fire, and yeah, I mean,
this money will come. Let's say the insurance funds.
Yeah.
Will they be able to get insurance?
Well, possibly not. I mean, the insurance companies are going to realize that this is a high risk of fire zone, and they won't necessarily do it, or maybe they'll build the houses differently. I don't know. I'm not an insurance expert. I mean, it's certainly, and that applies down here too. I mean, the insurance in Florida has gone crazy as a result of all these storms. But having sound money helps in every aspect of society. And I think the number of people who understand that in this world today is really way too small. And that's the heart of the problem, right?
Larry, we have about 1,700 listeners or viewers on X right now.
Oh my, that's
so we're going to cut them off. So do you have any final words that you'd like to say to the cyber listeners?
No, I just
have a private talk.
No, I first of all, thank you for everybody who's purchased the book. Thank you for supporting the book. Thank you for, I wrote it as a tool. I hope you use it as a tool. I hope it succeeds as a tool. I'm measuring its success based on normies converted. I wrote it with a specific purpose of trying to take an average person, if they're willing to take the time to read it, and it does take time. I mean, it's Jordan Walker America read it for me, and it's 12 and a half hours. But as I was informed by one of my friends, I can listen to it in 6 hours. I don't know how people can listen to stuff at 2x. I mean, when I listen to stuff at 2x, it just goes right past me. But if you're willing to listen to 12 and a half hours, even if you don't want to read the book, you can kind of get the story. And I'm deeply appreciative of everyone who supported the book and spread the word of the book, because I did this I felt like I got tapped on the shoulder. I felt like I was in a special position to write it because I've been in this battle, sound money, for a long, long time. And I could see the issues very clearly. And it was absolutely driving me batshit that nobody was paying attention to the right stuff. And so that was the cause of the reason for the book. And yes, I make money when I sell it. Some people say, well, you're just shilling books. But I'm going to give a lot of books away. I want everybody to understand this message, because I think the more people that we get understanding this message, the higher the probability that we return to a sound money society. And I think that sound money society will make all of our lives better, but more importantly, for those of us who are on the older side, it'll make our children and our grandchildren's lives better. And that's a very worthwhile goal. That's what we should be working for. I mean, Keynes said, look, in the long run, we're all dead, which is just an evil statement. I mean, the guy was an evil prick. Okay. And, yeah, he's dead, but we're living with the outcome of his stupid ideas. So, my request to everyone who's listening is please spread the word. That's what I would say. I just, You spread the word. And if somebody can't afford the book, DM me and I'll send you a copy. Most people can find the $15 for the book, but if you can't, I'll send you the EPUB version for free. I want to spread the word. So
I'm going to sit over here and I'm going to get in the frame and close out the live stream. So I just want to thank everyone for listening. We're going to cut off the live stream and have a more private conversation with Larry. So if you're in Naples and you can make it over here real quick, come on over. But also, I want everyone to know that we have a book signing set up at Barnes and Noble here in Naples. So if you are in the South Florida area and you want to come and buy a book and get it signed by Larry, you can come April 27th. We don't have the time exactly.
No, I think we do. I think it's 12 to 2.
I got an email today.
Maybe not.
To change it.
Okay.
It might be 2 to 4.
Okay.
So it will be in the afternoon on April 27th, and you can go to the Barnes and Noble website and look.
Yeah, and I want to thank John for setting that up, because I had no idea that Barnes and Noble was willing to do that. John, on his own accord, went over to Barnes and Noble, said, "I got this great book. I think your people would be interested in it." And Barnes and Noble was funny. They looked and, we don't have this in our catalog, and of course they don't, because no publisher has picked it up. And the book is edgy enough that I'm not sure a publisher ever will pick it up, and that's okay. It's on Amazon, and again, this is the way we're circumventing, the fiat book publishing circuit, right? I mean, they want to publish fiat books, fine. You can go buy their fiat books. This is the book that tells you what's really going on.
Yeah, and you actually owe Maddie some thanks he's the one that pushed me to really.
Well, then, thank you, Maddie. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And then the other thing, speaking of Maddie, we are going to do a series with Larry on the book. Maddie and Larry will do a deep dive, probably chapter by chapter, on the big print, and that'll be published on this channel, Protocol Pulse, and also the Cypherpunk'd channel. So those will be Cypherpunk'd episodes, and we're going to do that before the end of the month. So they'll probably be published the 1st of May.
And two other things I would say, just as a plug. I'm going to be at Bit Block Boom this weekend, and then I'm going to be at Cheat Code next week. So anybody who has a book and wants to bring it, I can sign it. I can't haul 100 books in my luggage to these events, and I can't ship authors' books to them. I mean, here's another great fiat thing. You want to buy the book from Amazon, pay full price, they'll have it to you in 2 days, right? If you're an author and you say to Amazon, "Please sell me my own book at your publishing cost," which is outrageously high, by the way. I mean, I've got guys who'll print it for $3, and Amazon charges me like $14. Okay, they say, "Yes, Mr. Lepard, we will get you those books, and they'll be there in 90 days." Isn't that amazing? It's fiat world, right? Because they're not making much money on it, so they just figure, well, we'll put them at the end of the line, right? So.
All right, so stay tuned for more content on this channel. Thank you, Larry, for joining.
Thanks, John.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we're cutting off.